Hello, good afternoon, and welcome. My name is Susan Lynch. I am the Associate Director of Lifetime Learning at the University of Virginia's Office of Engagement. I'm so pleased that you're joining us this afternoon for the program entitled Meditation, Altered States, and After-Death Communication. This topic has certainly garnered widespread interest. We have 2,000 people registered for today's event, and they come from 47 states across the country and 34 countries across the globe, from Australia to Costa Rica to Denmark and to Kenya. So again, welcome everyone. Before we get started, I want to bring a few things to your attention. We received many questions in advance of the program that have been shared with the speaker. If you have a question during the presentation, you may enter it in the webinar Q&A at the bottom of the screen. I'll moderate the Q&A toward the end of the presentation. You'll find resources in the webinar chat box below. Please also note this program is being recorded and will be posted in Lifetime Learning's podcast library in the coming weeks. Now I will introduce our speaker. J. Kim Penberthy is the Chester F. Carlson Professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Neurobehavioral Sciences and Professor of Research in Psychiatric Medicine in the Division of Perceptual Studies at the School of Medicine at the University of Virginia. A clinical psychologist, Penberthy's research interests include consciousness and psychology at the end of life, and research regarding the use of contemplative and mindfulness practices to enhance people's abilities and performance. She also specializes in working with patients with mental health issues and physical illnesses such as cancer, HIV, and diabetes. So we thank Professor Penberthy for being with us today. And Professor, I invite you to start your presentation.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation, and I believe you all can see that now. And I want to say thank you to the university and to the Lifetime Learning for this opportunity. We will be discussing some very interesting topics today, and I hope you are ready to join me. We will be learning a little bit about my interest and where I do my clinical and research work here at UVA, and focus on the meditation and altered consciousness, as well as after-death communication research that I do and how I weave this into my clinical work. We're also going to look at some implications for the future. I will tell you, often people ask me, how did I get interested in this line of research? And most of it was very informed by my early interest in books by our very own Raymond Moody, who many of you know is affiliated with the University of Virginia, and other readings I did. For instance, Emanuel Swedenborg, the Swedish scientist in the mid-1770s, who was a philosopher, theologian, and mystic, who wrote about science and spirituality. And early in my life, I learned transcendental meditation, which was very much informed my clinical work and my well-being personally. I went on to use this to get a PhD in clinical psychology, and initially did a lot of my research in mainstream areas looking at persistent depression, and eventually really found my passion was in some of these contemplative practices that included mindfulness that seemed to help in ways that therapy didn't always address. So things like altering consciousness in really therapeutic manners. So I did my training here at the University of Virginia for my fellowship in medical psychology. And I'm currently, as it was reported, in the Department of Psychiatry, treating psychiatry patients, and also fortunate enough to work in the cancer center seeing patients as well. This is our cancer center. I am practicing in a model that is called the science practitioner. And what this is a model of training where your research informs your clinical work, and your clinical work and the needs of your patients inform the research you do. And this has been a part of my career from the beginning. I've been at the University of Virginia since 1998 and feel very passionately that I will never stop seeing patients and I'll never stop doing research, because they feed each other in my world. I have the privilege of working with these people that are suffering from psychological illness, And often the people with cancer are struggling with not only the cancer, but other psychological components. And I also have the fortune to work with their family and loved ones. I'm going to weave some stories through this presentation about my clinical work and how it is informing my research and vice versa. I, as I said, see and treat people who have cancer and are undergoing treatment. And therefore, I also work with their families and loved ones and support them. It was a woman I was working with who had metastatic breast cancer, and she was dying, and she knew this. She was a devout Catholic. She had a strong faith, and she knew she was prepared to die. Her problem was that she was worried about her husband. Her husband of 45 years, they had been married very long time. She was worried that he would struggle when she was gone. And she was right. About 6 months after her death, he contacted me. He was very despondent and reported being distracted and not able to function. His distraction was related to yearning for his wife, and also the struggle was impairing his functioning, his mood. We'll call him John Doe. I'll weave this story throughout, but I did begin to work with John Doe, and I feel fortunate, as I said, to work with families and the patients. I also conduct research. My research includes primarily work at the Division of Perceptual Studies. Some of you may know about this division and some may not. It's been around for over 75 years, founded in 1967 by Dr. Ian Stevenson, and he was the department chair at that time. The focus of the Division of Perceptual Studies is investigating this mind-body relationship and the possibility that consciousness may survive physical death. So a lot of the work we do related to consciousness is exploring the nature of it and how it relates to our physical world. I take that and apply it to the patients that I work with as well. So some of the work we do at the Division of Perceptual Studies includes studying children who remember past lives. This has been the work of Jim Tucker and Ian Stevenson before him. Near-death experiences. Many of you may know Dr. Bruce Grayson, who does this work. Out-of-body experiences and the work I do after-death communications. We study altered states of consciousness also, and I will talk about that via meditation and different contemplative practices. We also look at altered states of consciousness that are spontaneous. So things that happen spontaneously, often the after-death communications are spontaneous. In addition, we look at the neurophysiological or physiological aspects that are associated with these altered states. So looking at what is happening to the individual physiologically when this is happening. Some of our research that we're just beginning, and I'm so excited to pioneer this, is looking at altered states brought about by psychedelic substances. So looking at that. And I will say, I think it's very important to note that we are certainly not the first researchers to do this. We have been doing this now increasingly in the West, but there have been many people and cultures before us that have pursued this knowledge. So I want to recognize that the indigenous people of the world, the ancient cultures, the current cultures that are still practicing this and embodying this and have belief systems, religious, spiritual, and otherwise, it's our hope that other scientists will join in addressing the nature of consciousness and the study of this. So this is the work we're doing, and we honor the work that has been done before. So we will now get into the meat of it. What is consciousness? This is a very, very broad topic. So obviously, we're going to try to willow it down to something that we can actually study. The hard problem of consciousness, many of you may have heard of this, is this understanding of why would a physical process produce subjective experience? How on earth does our brain, a physical brain, produce consciousness? So this is our challenge, measuring this subjective experience in an objective way. This is part of why when we do research, we're asking participants how they feel, what they think, what their experiences are, and we're also trying to explore what's happening in the brain. We have to get this first person representation from people to help understand. So that's sort of the background of the kind of work that we do. And you can study more about this through the International Society for Contemplative Research link that was provided, as well as our Division of Perceptual Studies link, where we talk a great deal more about this big question and the theories underneath it. As I said, I'm going to make this much more applicable. As a clinician, I need to sort of pull this into a realm where we can actually do something with it with individuals. So this is an area of where I study. So altered states of consciousness, specifically looking at different forms of meditation, different forms of, we can call it contemplative practice. So these are cultivated states of deep awareness and presence that can lead to all kinds of effects. Also, psychedelics, as I said, we're getting a program up and running looking at this. This is a way to induce altered states of consciousness through a different methodology with plant medicine. And then I study death and after death experiences. So I've done studies in the past on fear of death and dying, and currently are exploring after death communications and these impacts. We also are always looking at the brain as we move through this research, trying to understand what is happening in the brain's network and how it is being impacted. So there are many forms of meditation, and you can see some of them here. I think it's helpful to sort of have a bit of an understanding of the language of meditation so that you can understand there's many, many different ways to achieve these altered states of consciousness. There's Vipassana, what we would call mindful meditation or mindfulness. And this is more of an observing of thoughts and sensations without judgment in the present, really focusing on present moment awareness. There's a concentration meditation, many of you might have heard of. This is when you focus on a single object, so maybe a candle flame. There are other meditations, a metta meditation, which is a loving kindness meditation. A compassion meditation is also there. We've done research with, and of course, I mentioned earlier, transcendental meditation. This is a very ancient Vedic tradition and form of meditation. So my question now for you is going to be brought up is a question about how many of you practice some form of meditation or have a contemplative practice of your own. And you can say, yes, I practice regularly. Yes, I practice some. Or no, I do not practice. Oh, look at that. Okay, so we have 43% say you practice some, 29% do not practice, and we have 28, almost 30% say, yes, I practice regularly. Well, for those of you, thank you for that. For those of you who practice regularly, it's helpful to know that there are all kinds of health benefits from a regular meditation practice or any kind of contemplative practice. It can reduce stress, alleviate symptoms of anxiety and depression, and in some studies, we even have found that it's comparable to antidepressant medication without the side effects. So there's obviously clinical implications, and if you've seen your physician for blood pressure or stress related illnesses, they may have instructed you to try to integrate it into your daily routine. So it can be helpful for pain, insomnia, and preventing relapse of depression. We also see that it has a real impact on your brain and increases gray matter in regions linked to learning and memory and stress regulation. And these are all associated with improved health and well-being and engaged memory function and that sort of thing. So I want you to remember quickly the the gentleman John Doe I mentioned, and how he had approached me after the unfortunate death of his wife of 40 some years, and was suffering with grief and symptoms of depression and anxiety and distress after her death. I had tried many things, as had he, medications and different kinds of therapies to help him, all with little success. He was still struggling very much with the death of his wife. He was still grieving and not functioning. And eventually, it was determined that he met criteria for prolonged grief disorder. This is a kind of grief that is prolonged in that it lasts a year or more, and that it is consistent of very serious symptoms. So much so that they may interfere with your functioning. Unfortunately, he did meet criteria, and he was so distracted by his grief, it was very hard. He had one particular distressing thought that finally we got to. And this thought, it turns out, was that John thought, well, he knew he loved his wife. He knew he loved her passionately. They had been sweethearts in high school, and she was the love of his life. Here's the thing, though. After she died, he didn't know if she loved him. And now he would never know because she was gone. And this was a rumination of thought that he could just not get rid of. So I decided to work with him to learn meditation, to learn Vipassana specifically. And this was because it was presumed to be the main thing that was like keeping him in this place of depression and grief. And so he was very skeptical. He had never done anything like this before. He worked with me, though, diligently, and I taught him how to meditate. And over several months, he became a very excellent student. He worked very hard, and it did indeed help reduce his distress. And I had hypothesized that this would work based on the research that existed in the literature and the research that we had done ourselves here at UVA. So initially, I did studies that were more for students, college students. Some excellent student researchers helped me, and we looked at what would it be like to teach some meditation to students, undergraduate students. So the way we did this was a course. There was a survey course that looked at teaching people about different meditation traditions, where they came from. That was one part of the course. And then modern applications, sort of integrating these things like mindfulness-based stress reduction and practicing that. So there was a lab where they also practiced and were encouraged to practice on their own. And what we measured then over time in the course of this semester with about 250 students was we looked at their well-being and psychological distress, as well as mindfulness and compassion and coping. So our hypothesis was that those students that learned this would have improved immense in this area. I was a little skeptical because these were third-year students, excellent students, already very high achieving, very talented people. And yet I was surprised that we did see statistically significant increases in well-being, things like self-acceptance, having a purpose in life. We saw decreases in their distress, which was very hopeful for me. It was so gratifying to see that. And we also saw enhancement in their mindfulness, the levels of mindfulness, and really importantly, their self-compassion. So this compassion they have for themselves, for forgiving themselves, that sort of thing. And even better, we saw significant improvements in their coping skills. What more could you ask for? So this was really, really positive and got me even more excited about mindfulness research and the positive effects. Because remember, these were students who signed up for a course They weren't students who said, yes, I want to learn this and I want to improve myself. So this was just from taking this course and doing the exercises as part of the course. So the next research study I did really looked at, well, how is this different though from any other healthy sort of behavior, like exercise? So we did a study where we randomized people, and that means we recruited them and we randomly chose to assign them to a meditation group where they were novices learning meditation, or an exercise group and where they practice exercise. And we had 87 naive people, meaning they were not very serious exercisers and did not know meditation. And we randomly assigned them over 8 weeks, and they had 9 different visits. And we measured, again, some of these key components. We looked at mindfulness, and we did see significant increase in levels of mindfulness in both groups over time. Um, but it was significantly more in the meditation group. Interestingly, there was even higher rates of psychic abilities and beliefs in the meditation group. So this would be things like they endorsed more synchronicities in their life. They endorsed that they predicted things and they happened more. So those sort of psychic abilities and beliefs in those were both increased in only the meditation group. They also significantly increased their levels of spirituality. This is self-endorsed spirituality, and their social connectedness more than the exercise group. So these things were very significantly different in the meditation group. They were much more present. Also interesting is overall general well-being. We measured that, and that seemed to improve in both groups, which again makes sense to me. Exercise does improve your overall general well-being. So we knew exercise was having an impact. Meditation, however, was having a very different and unique impact in these other ways, looking at increasing their mindfulness and also these other sort of abilities. So imagine, can you imagine if we can get people to meditate and exercise? Wow, you're going to have superhumans. That'll be great. That was not our next study, however. Our next study looked at, let's just look at meditators versus non-meditators and see if we can find these paranormal experiences again, these psychic abilities again that they endorsed. Again, this was sort of a surprise to us. This was just through meditating and not even people that really came to learn psychic abilities. So in this study, we had 118 individuals, all again meditation naive, and they were divided into a group that meditated and a group that did not. The group that did not, we just met with them and asked them questions, and we sort of had a time control for that, but we did not teach them to meditate. Interestingly, our meditator group reported more paranormal experiences from the get-go, and these only increased. So we don't really know what was going on there, but we do know that their meditation practice, more than the people that did not meditate, seemed to be associated with increased mindfulness. And again, this higher frequency of self-reported paranormal experiences. Now, we did also in the study have a very interesting part where we actually had them do tests online. These were designed by our colleagues at the Institute of Noetic Science out in California. And these are online tests that test your psychic ability. So they have you do things like predict the next picture that will come up on your screen. And we did not see any changes in these groups over time. So the meditators and non-meditators, neither of them seem to improve in this task over time. And we hypothesized that they were experiencing it in their own life and reporting it, but not able to demonstrate it. And that might be due to the small number of people we had, 118, or perhaps the tasks were not sensitive enough, or perhaps they just were not the highest quality because it was over a computer. So that was very, very interesting to find out in the series of studies that meditation is very, very helpful for you to reduce your stress, to improve all these physical sort of components, and also seems to be affiliated with even more things. So, what happens when you meditate? I mean, this is a very important question. And as I said, we like to try and get physiological measures and look at the brain. So what we know is that the unlike what you might hypothesize, sometimes people think, well, if you meditate, then maybe you're connecting everything more and it's all firing more and it's more active. In actuality, what's happening is that if you look at scans like PET scans or fMRIs, you see that our brains actually stop processing information as actively as they normally would. And so we show actually a decrease, especially in beta waves, even after a single 20-minute meditation. And so what we're seeing is essentially, it's like almost like the brain is getting out of the way. And that's really very interesting to us because maybe it's opening us up to, other aspects of reality. So I'd like to ask now another question. And this is, have you had an experience that you cannot explain while you were meditating or using a contemplative practice? Now, obviously, this assumes you've done some meditating or some contemplative practice. Thinking back, though, in those times when you were doing that, did you have any kind of experience that you couldn't explain? And the answers here are yes, no, or I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm always interested to see this answer. All right. So we've got a very diverse crowd here. So 40% said yes, you've had some experience you can't explain while meditating or using a contemplative practice. 40, an equal amount said no, and 21% said I do not know. Very interesting. Well, I will let you know that we have research that shows what else can happen when you're meditating and in a deep state is all kinds of stuff, extraordinary experiences like transcending your body. So, feeling that you're out of your body, oneness or connectedness with the world or the cosmos. We can see transmission from teacher to subject in that sort of teacher relationship with a master where you're learning yoga or something. We can see that. Veridical visions, visions that come true, synchronicities and precognition, sort of predicting things, extrasensory perception. Um, there's not always good things that happen, so it can also be disorientation or feeling negative or frightening experiences, as well as experiences of God or deities or non-physical entities. People often may meet their relatives or ancestors. And we know when people are meditating in a group, you can also have these group dynamics that are very interesting, where you may see other group members in your visions. So these extraordinary things can happen when we're meditating, not just the positive physical impact of lowering our blood pressure or reducing our distress. And many of these, interestingly enough, are not just strange unusual experiences, they can be very healing or even life-changing. And one of the things we do know as well is that it seems that there seems to be a significant relationship between the amount of meditation or contemplative practice and some of these experiences. So it seems that the more you practice, if you have a regular routine, there seems to be a higher likelihood of having some of these unusual experiences. And I'm going to say that some of the most impactful experiences that I have had people share with me are these experiences of communicating with ancestors, or recently deceased individuals, what we would call an after-death communication. Now, I have done a great deal of research on after-death communications, both those induced by sort of a meditative state and spontaneous. And my initial research was on spontaneous after-death communications. So I'm going to define it here as a spontaneous one because a lot of our data is from people that spontaneously report this. And this is a communication initiated by a deceased individual without initiation or solicitation from the person and directly. So it's a direct communication from a deceased to a living. And this is not using a medium or any kind of device like a Ouija board. This is really just a direct communication. And what we know is it, in the definition of it, it often involves a reassuring message, a resolving sort of communication, reaffirming, or releasing. These are shared enough that we can see these four R's often happening. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the different kinds here, the different kinds of communication from deceased individuals have been studied so much we can categorize it. There's at least 12. Now you might come up with more. You can see here a list of some of them. Sensing the presence of the person is the most common. Is that sensation that the loved one's near. You could also hear them. You can smell something. You can feel a touch. You can see them. You can have twilight experiences. They often occur like as you're falling asleep or awaking from sleep or praying or some sort of altered state like that, intentional or not. You can have them while you're sleeping. They are defined very differently than dreams, just contextually very different. You can have an out-of-body after-death communication where you have contact with the deceased that's described as a visitation with departed in their new environment. So you're visiting them. There can be physical phenomena, lights flicking off and on. We now know there can be more electronic ones, so phone calls, text messages, things like that. And of course, very, very common are these symbolic. So a communication that is felt to be through another animal or object like a bird or butterfly. Interestingly, many people don't realize, but it's estimated that between 25 and 60% of mourners worldwide experience one or more spontaneous after-death communications. And more recently, so if you didn't believe that, that's some past literature, and it's sort of broad, 25 to 60, that's a big range. Recent research, just looking at Americans, this was from the Pew Research poll, 53% of Americans endorsed that they had experienced an after-death communication in their lifetime. That's over half. And 44% of Americans reported having an after-death communication just in the past year. This was just mind-boggling to me because this is no longer anomalous. We can't say this is a rare thing. This is happening to about half of the people, at least in America. And we know this happens worldwide. Thus, it makes me wonder, is this something that maybe we are built for? Is this something that is more natural and common? And we just haven't thought of it that way in our culture currently. We do know from the research that these events occur with people of all nationalities, ethnicities, religious affiliations. You don't have to be religious to have this. Income level, education level, it happens across the board. And importantly, we have looked at are these experiences only happening in people with, thought disorders or some sort of mental illness, and that is not the case. So typically, individuals who have these after-death communications are just like all of us. They're sort of just people living and functioning in the world. Widows and widowers are especially likely to report these events, with females more than men. We don't really know why, except that maybe women live longer than men, and so they may be grieving their spouse. It may be more likely that women are grieving, or they may be more likely to report it. So I'm going to ask a question now about your own experience. And in your own life, do you think you have had an after-death communication? And you can define it with the 12 categories we had, or whatever way you would define it. And the answers are yes or no, or I don't know, I'm not sure. All right. Wow. Look at that. We are at the top end of that of that data point. So 60% said yes, you've had what you think is an after-death communication. 25% no, and 15% not sure. Very interesting. I think that fits well with our data. So we did some research of our own looking at these experiences of after-death communication. And this was a worldwide study involving multiple countries and languages. And we really just wanted to find the phenomenology of these ADCs. It had not been done before. No one had really looked at who has these kind of experiences, what are the circumstances, what are they like, and importantly, how do they impact recipients? So I'm not going to go into all the details. There have been multiple papers published on this, all very well done, very informative. I will give some highlights though. So we know, first of all, that these can have an impact on individuals. And so when we did the research, we had almost 1,000 people that we researched, and we gave them about, I think it was close to 350 questions describing their experiences. We really wanted to get to know what they were experiencing, what it was like, and how it impacted them. 81% of those, I think it was 993 people, reported that it brought them comfort or emotional healing. So this signifies to us this potential therapeutic nature of these experiences. 84% considered it to be important in their bereavement process. 63% said that it really deepened their relationship with the deceased because of having these experiences. And 61% said that it did not make the physical absence more painful. So some people think if I have these, I'm going to feel worse, and that's not necessarily true. 61% expressed a wish to have more contact. So they wanted this. 41% said that their sadness remained the same, and 40% said it reduced the sadness. This to me is not surprising as a clinician, because as we know, a lot of these experiences, they don't eliminate the fact that your loved one is gone and you miss them and you're sad that they're gone. Of course, that's there. We're talking about, though, changing the relationship with the grief so that you can function and you can move on, and you might find some different kind of meaning from it. We saw just a very small percent say their increase in sadness happened, and a very small percent saying their sadness was removed entirely. So that's sort of an outlier. Most of the people, it's in the middle there. And very interestingly, 70% of the individuals endorsed an increased or same strong spirituality level. So if they were spiritual before, it increased, and if they weren't, it increased. So this study, as I said, had 993 people, fairly large, and we saw prevalence rates that matched what we find in the research. Depending on the bereaved individual, we saw that those with deceased individuals who were partners or spouses seem to have higher rates of after-death communications. It does seem to have this significant comforting effect in reducing grief. Is definitely different from hallucination. So these people did not have psychopathology. These were not hallucinations based on what they reported. And the predictive factors, people always ask, well, who had these? What is it that seems to trigger this? It was a close relationship, which again, to me, makes intuitive sense. And again, we see higher rates in people who lost a partner or spouse. The impact of the after-death communications is incredibly important to me. So what we saw here was that it was definitely experienced as authentic. So these people knew this was real. It decreased their fear of death, interestingly. So it provided that comfort in addition to reducing their grief. Perhaps that's correlated with the increased levels of spirituality, but it did bring comfort and healing, and it increased their belief in life after death, which makes sense because they have some evidence now. Also, over and over again, people endorsed that this experience was very highly treasured. So, why is this important after death communications? I mean, personally, I'm beginning to believe through my research and my clinical experience that we may be built this way, that we are built to receive this, and that it is a part of our healing process. So, I want you to remember that patient, John Doe, the one with prolonged grief who had lost his wife. He learned to meditate, remember? After about 6 months of hard work, he came to me and said he's really had a very deep meditation and that he feels like his grief has been addressed, like he feels like he's better and he doesn't need to see me anymore. And I said, well, this is fabulous. What happened? May I ask? And let me share with you what he reported to me. He said he was in his regular practice of meditation at the end of the day. Again, dealing with this repetitive thought of, did she love me? Did she love me? Will I ever know? But he was working with meditation just to be present, to be open. And he said she came to him. His wife came to him. And he said it was a very intimate experience that he wouldn't share with me. And what he learned is that she did love him. She loved him then, she loves him now. And this after death communication, not what he called it, I gave it that name later, but this visit from her is what helped resolve his grief and allowed him to move on. So this is important to that individual for sure, to that John Doe. It's also important to all the grieving people out there. And we have many of them. COVID was a mortality shock throughout the world. We have other mortality shots where we have massive natural disasters, wars, and those are tragic enough, but they also leave in their wake a second wave of health concerns in those grieving individuals because there's data here that we came from the COVID losses, and yet we know it applies to other major losses around the world. For every death, every person that dies, roughly 9 times as many bereaved people are left behind. So we have that to deal with. We have to do something for these individuals. So that is my work in my research going forward. How can you invite an after-death communication? It is possible. There's ways to meditate, to invite this. Here's one strategy that has worked for some individuals: being open, putting your expectations aside. It doesn't happen if you sit there and say, come to me, come to me. So accepting that this is normal to feel some nervousness when you try this. Report to yourself, just be in the moment, don't judge, and be prepared for anything. I just encourage you, if you wish to have an after-death communication, there are ways to try. There are different ways to be open and present, including meditation, including prayer, other contemplative practices. And this will be my ongoing research, I have to say. So future directions for research for myself and those that are doing this work at the Division of Perceptual Studies. We're going to continue with the after-death communication research. We have a study right now looking at verifiable after-death communications. So these are communications people have had perhaps with another person present, or they received information that they couldn't have gotten any other way. And we do our detective work. We're interviewing them and recording this information and compiling these stories because the verifiable after death communications are out there, and this adds another layer of information for us to look at. We're also doing research and getting this up and running, trying to get funding for this to induce after death communications while people are under fMRI and looking at what's happening in their brain. Also, not everyone can meditate. Not everyone has this ability or time or wants to put the effort in to learn meditation like my John Doe who works so hard. So, thinking about other ways to alter our consciousness, including things like psychedelic drugs. So, we have a psilocybin study where we're looking at one dose of psilocybin that will create these hallucinogenic effects, these sort of altered states of consciousness, and exploring the impact of that on grief. And again, people with prolonged grief who are really struggling and just can't sort of move through that. And we're hoping that that will help induce one of these subjective experiences that allow them to sort of address that grief and change their relationship with it in a healthier way. We also are open to community participation. So trying to connect with people about what is needed in your lives. How would you use this? How do you see this moving forward? So we really look to help the community help us in this ongoing research. So I will just end with this quote that I just adore. This is a quote that says, "We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having an experience of being human." So thank you so much for your time and attention. And I look forward to your questions right now. I very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. What a wonderful presentation. Certainly there are many questions coming in. Um, so I think we'll step back to meditation. Obviously, the questions that are coming up now are about the after-death communication, since we've gotten into that. But I want to step back just to quickly to meditation. And several folks were asking specifically about transcendental meditation. Um, you know, is that someone said I've been doing transcendental meditation twice a day for 50 years, and how have I improved my chances of living a healthier life? Or some people have asked about effective strategies. So, is there specific kinds of meditation, and what is it that they're ultimately impacts for their life?
That's a wonderful question. And I think if people have been doing transcendental meditation that long, oh my goodness, yes, of course, that's going to have a very positive effect. I mean, it can be confusing when you look at the literature because there's often not a very detailed description of what meditation is in these studies. And that's why I tried to break it down. Typically, people are talking about in the current literature, vipassana. So sort of focused on being present in a non-judgmental way. This is similar to mindfulness-based stress reduction, which has become very big in the medical and psychological literature. Transcendental meditation, of course, had its heyday a while ago, a few decades ago. And unfortunately, there, I think, was some not so good publicity about some publications. And so it has sort of fallen out of favor. It doesn't mean that it's not effective. I myself would love to resurrect some research on transcendental meditation because I do think that's probably one of the most effective strategies we have. It's so well taught, and it's such a disciplined practice and incredibly effective. Yeah.
Great, great, thank you. And just quickly, people are asking about meditation and how it increases their personal intuition. It sounds like you absolutely believe that, and that's an important piece.
Yes, yes. And again, many people don't go into it with that intention. So I'm not advocating, oh, I'm going to win the lottery if I meditate. Um, I think though, just being aware, for me, I think it's very, very important to be aware that some of these unusual experiences may happen. And because I have had individuals come to me and ask, am I losing my mind? Because I am floating out of my body when I'm doing this meditation. And so, just to educate people that these things can happen, we're not necessarily striving for them. In fact, some ancient practices really don't encourage that. They say learn this because it's a good thing, and not to achieve these what are called siddhis or abilities, psychic abilities or things like that. I think, though, it is important to know that these often do occur, especially if you have, as I said, a more routine practice, because it does seem to be a correlation between the amount and those experiences.
Great. I'm going to jump now to there's
Sure.
many, many questions about the after-death communication, as I'm sure you can imagine. You had mentioned that there's an increased experiences of after-death communication in those who have a spouse or a partner that has passed. Someone is asking about experiences of those who have lost a child.
So we have looked at things like death, unexpected or violent death, but we have not looked at children specifically. Part of it is because that is just such a unique class of loss, that we really know that we need to be very careful there. And there are excellent support groups for individuals who've lost children, but we have to date not done work there. I think we wanted to make sure we can do this well, we can do this very ethically, and support our individuals when we do this. So I probably would not do a big survey study across the globe asking specifically about that, just because I would want access to the individual to help support them. With that said, though, we could go back to our data set of 993 people and explore, if they endorse that they have lost a child. And what that is like. But we have not analyzed that data yet.
Yes, I can see how that would be very sensitive. Yes,
Hmm.
thank you. Um, Several people have talked about, you know, proof for these types of things. And how do you respond to people who say there is no proof of after-death communication?
Well, I think two things. One is that is part of why we're looking at the verifiable data, um, because we do wonder. I mean, I'm a scientist, so I'm not going in with an answer that I think is, I go in with a hypothesis, but I'm a scientist, so I'm curious. So I don't know. I don't know. I know that clinically, as a clinician, these are often reported to be very true to the individual experiencing them. And so I think we can do both. We can look at, well, can we find any cases that are verifiable, where there was a witness that we can corroborate and trust, or there was data gathered, or information that was provided that they could not know any other way? And believe me, this is hard to find in this day and age with computers and access and everything. We're trying, though. And from a clinician point of view, I say, does it really matter? If it is changing an individual's life, helping them move on, um, and function and raise their children and do what they need to do, I don't frankly care if it's real or not. It was real to them and it had a real impact, and that's enough for me.
Right. Certainly your example of John Doe is a good example of that. Somebody asked about, again, sort of the proof of this, could this be an hallucination? I'm sure that that is something that's asked often as another question.
Yeah, I mean, and we've done our best to sort of see if that's the case. Are these people hallucinating other things? Do they have a thought disorder that makes them prone to hallucinations. And in most of the literature, over and over again, we see that is not the case. These don't seem to be happening in people with hallucination disorders, and they seem qualitatively different when they are described from hallucinations. So, you know, we can look, this is part of the research we're hoping to do in looking at the brain. Do they look different in the brain? If someone has a hallucination,
Mhm.
does that look different than someone who is having an after death communication? So that can be part of it.
Great. There were some questions about that as far as how that would look in access in the brain. Um, Someone asked, how can health practitioners in the community who work with people around these topics communicate and collaborate with perceptual studies?
Oh, that is a wonderful question. Number one, you can reach out to us. We have a website that I think I've dropped in for this presentation. And we love hearing from individuals out in the community. We are hoping to also have a focus of education moving forward. And this would have to be in collaboration with people out in the community, people in our health system, where we help people understand what this means when these things happen. Because what I have seen, unfortunately, is two things. People either don't disclose because they're afraid they will be judged or not believed, or they disclose and they are told that there's something wrong with them, that that's not true, or that they go get a referral to a psych eval or something. So we don't want that to happen. We want people to be able to share what their experiences are and to have healthcare providers, mental health care providers, chaplains, other people in nursing understand that, what are these things, and how are they different. And certainly I give a lecture about this too in the medical school, the difference between a pathological states and non-pathological unusual experiences. So, and you can have both. You can have a pathological state, you can have schizophrenia or bipolar disorder and also have these experiences. Or you can have one or the other. So it gets complicated for sure. We really are hoping to have some sort of summit where we can bring a lot of people that are interested in this to the table and discuss how to promote this, how to discuss it, how to weave our research in this, as well as educating people and providing reassurance and care for individuals who experience these things.
Well, thank you so much, Professor. Unfortunately, we are at our time. We've had so many questions and so much engagement in this, and we really appreciate it. So I really appreciate you speaking with us this afternoon. This is such an interesting presentation, such a timely and relevant topic to many. I learned so much. I'm sure our audience agrees. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise with UVA alumni, friends, and families. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So if you enjoyed this program, I hope you'll consider joining us for future lifetime learning programs. To learn more, please visit our website at engagement.virginia.edu/learn. When you get to our website, you will find our upcoming programs, the Vodcast Library, our Thoughts from the Lawn blogs, and our UVA Speaks podcast series to read, watch, and listen to our expert UVA faculty. So thank you again for joining us for this hour of learning, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your afternoon and evening. Thank you.